Good evening. I would call to order the March 11th, 2020 meeting of the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission. We have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp?
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here. Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Scales?
Here.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Here.
Commissioner Clemens?
Here.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Would everyone stand with me, please, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While I have you standing, anyone who is going to testify tonight before this board has to be sworn in. So would you please raise your right hand and swear that any testimony you provide tonight will be the whole truth, so help you God. Thank you. A reminder also for everyone to silence all electronic devices and as well that anyone who gives testimony tonight needs to sign in. We have a sign-in sheet out in the hall there and one on the podium. And when you are at the podium, please speak directly into the microphone. Otherwise, we can't hear you and the home TV audience can't either. Our first item is the approval of the minutes of the January 8, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion?
Motion, Lavoy.
Second
approve.
comments.
Okay. Have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, excellent. Minutes are approved. At this point, we have a unique open forum where anyone from the village can come up to the podium and address any subject other than what's on this evening's agenda. Do we have anyone present who would like to discuss anything publicly? All right. Then we'll move on, and I'll do a quick review of the procedures we use for our public hearings. First, the petitioner is introduced and comes forward and presents his or her petition. Then staff comments follow, followed by the public is allowed to question and comment. Of course, the petitioner can also respond to those comments as well. Also, the same with the village attorney can Mr. Zemanek here can come in at any time for guidance at council. Following that, the commissioners get to have their say-sos and ask their questions. And finally, the commissioners will vote. And just as a reminder that this commission is advisory only. The final say-so is the village board. So whatever the votes are tonight, when the issue moves forward to the village board, staff will notify you when that is, and the village board are the ones, their vote is the one that has legal standing. Our first item tonight is under old business. This is a continuance of the public hearing that we had last month. We'll reopen that at this time under Planning and Zoning Commission 19-028, a request from the Community Development Department regarding properties located along East Quincy Street in Westmont for the following. A zoning text amendment to the Village of Westmont zoning code to create a limited manufacturing district M1. And B, a zoning map amendment to the Village of Westmont zoning map to rezone certain properties located along East Quincy Street between Cass Avenue and Richmond Avenue to M1 Limited Manufacturing District. The property common addresses that will be affected are 20 and 26 East Quincy, 100 and 130 East Quincy, 138 East Quincy, 200 East Quincy, 222, and 318 East Quincy. With that, Ms. Johnson, are you going to present for the village?
Yes, I will be presenting item related to the M1 district creation. We have two items on the agenda. One of them is creating an M1 district to implement a motion that was made at the last meeting to change the proposed land use map from residential to industrial, light industrial. So that vote was taken at the last meeting, and now we're moving forward to the next step, which is to create the M1 designation that will match the light industrial designation. Even though the proposed land use map says light industrial, we're really talking about limited. Limited meaning that it could be more intensive industrial uses and not just limited to light, or what we typically consider as light. Our designation in the proposed land use map of light industrial includes all types or mixes of manufacturing uses. And so now what we're doing is we've created, and I want to thank everybody in the community and also the attorneys that worked on this very hard to create a district that will serve the properties east of Cass, along East Quincy on the north side, all the way to Richmond. These properties have been historically manufacturing uses. They've been pillars of the community. They've been there for many, many years. And it really is a disservice to these properties for them to be zoned residential. They're not able to conduct business and possibly sell or have succession plans for their businesses. So the next step is to create this district, to consider it, to make a motion to vote on this district. And following that, the second item will be to rezone the properties as another item of consideration. I'll point you to the staff report on page 8, where we have outlined a little bit of the limited manufacturing recommendation related to creating the district that will provide for more compatible manufacturing-friendly uses, while at the same time being located in the downtown core. So we are very cognizant that they need to coexist with the residential uses, the small businesses, the railroads, the high pedestrian traffic, the new apartment buildings, and so on. So this category recognizes that and limits and separates out some of the uses that may not be compatible with this area specifically, which is why we're creating this district to be more of a custom-made district for the area. I'd also like to share page 9 related to the current zoning, which is R5 along most of that corridor. Some is a couple of properties are designated manufacturing already.
Do you have a slide you could
I
put up?
do have a slide, and I'd
Could
like
depict
to share it. If you like it. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, so here it is. The properties along the bottom corridor. This is really a scenario that we had considered before, which would be to leave things as they are. To leave things as they are would mean to leave things residential, manufacturing where they be one on the corner. And the corridor to the north, the little piece to the north, shows what the existing uses are. And so you can see very visually here the disconnect between what's there now and the zoning that that the property owners have to work with, and it's not really working for them. So at the last meeting, the vote was made to create a district and to, not to create a district, to change the land use map from residential to industrial to match what's there now. I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the attorney, because the reason is that the property owners along this corridor have also applied. They're stakeholders in the community, and they have applied for text amendment officially. We waived the fees, and I think it'll be more conducive to getting a presentation of what, the district is all about.
Me?
Actually.
Okay. May I make just a
Yes.
few comments also? You did receive, I think, a letter from me that kind of described, as
right.
Nalini said, the kind of the purpose of creating this district. A few things to highlight from that letter. All of the existing uses along East Quincy, with the exception of one that I will get to, are treated as permitted uses in this zoning ordinance. Even those uses such as the IGE use, which is a little more intensive and in the use list requires a special use, because it's pre-existing, we've classified all pre-existing uses as permitted uses in this zoning district. So no current property owner has to come in and apply for a special use for their underlying use. They're all permitted. That a benefit to those properties. However, many of these uses do have outdoor storage, and the village does not have records as to whether the outdoor storage started before the zoning ordinance of the village was first enacted, which has always prohibited outdoor storage. We don't know whether the outdoor storage is grandfathered or not. Even if it were grandfathered, we don't know if it's changed over time or expanded over time. So as a result, the village is requiring that all properties with outdoor storage have to come back and seek special use approval for their outdoor storage. And the village is going to cooperate with those businesses by helping to complete the application, pay the required fees for publication, et cetera, so there's no out-of-pocket cost to the property owners to do so. But we are imposing a requirement on the property owners that they prepare a site and landscaping plan as part of their special use process. And we're not requiring that they retain an engineer and prepare a formal site plan or landscaping plan like you're used to seeing, but they can take an existing survey or a GIS aerial of the property and demonstrate where on the property they have materials, equipment, vehicles stored, and kind of designate those storage areas on the property, make sure there's drive aisles, make sure there's adequate screening, et cetera, and this commission will have an ability to review that. And there may be, you know, a few changes that are recommended, such as confine your storage to this general area so vehicles can get in and out, et cetera. But at least the village will know what products, materials, vehicles are being stored there, and if that were to change over time, contrary to the special use approval, then the village could take appropriate enforcement action. I think it turns out to be a win-win for everyone, but it does require an extra step for the business owners. The setbacks, the various bulk regulations have been revised over time as we work through this draft, and the setbacks are basically 5 feet for the front yard, side yard, and side yard adjoining a street, and 10 feet in the rear yard. So really generous or small setbacks, but there are several buildings in this area that have like 0 lot line setbacks currently, and therefore would be considered legal non-conforming structures. Those structures can continue, they can be maintained and repaired as necessary, but if an owner wishes to expand one of those legal non-conforming structures, normally they'd have to come in for a variance and be able to approve a hardship, which might be difficult for them to do. And we worked in this regard with the attorney for IGE. I believe it was his suggestion that said, why don't we treat any expansion as planned development? So instead of requiring the owner who wishes to expand to get variances, they'd be considered exceptions from the zoning ordinance, in the hope that in expanding there'd be some flexibility and corresponding public benefits through the planned development process. I think that's all I have.
Good explanation, thank you. And Mr. Daniel, did you have any comments on this?
Briefly, if I may.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L. I am an attorney that has been representing industrial gas engineering on this since, I think sometime last fall when the nuisance issue came up with the containers. I only represent IGE. During my work on this, I've gone through the district and reviewed the outdoor storage, the outdoor sales operations, and spent quite a bit of time looking at the lots. And I think it's important to note that the lots are all shallow. They're about 100 feet deep to 111 feet deep. So they're different than other lots in ordinary manufacturing districts, which is the principal reason why Mr. Zemanek spent quite a bit of time talking about the plan unit development mechanism. That's a very important component of this project, because with lots of the depth that we're dealing with here, whether it's Bales, whether it's IGE, whether it's the Park District on their vacant lot or on their maintenance lot, the township, or on the Akbar lot at the corner, just on the other side of the Park District lot from us, Rebco is the name of the business operating there. They all have special issues because of that depth. They don't have your ordinary on-site loading. There's loading done from the street on several of them. They don't meet the parking regulations, and they'll have difficulty meeting the parking regulations when it comes to the zoning ordinance. So a plan unit development process allows the village to recognize that each of these lots is in a special circumstance, and each one of them needs to be evaluated differently. A variance process, typically you ask, well, is this a special circumstance applicable to no other lot in the district? Parking and loading, the issue applies to almost every lot in the district. So it'd be very difficult to have that, those issues discussed. When it comes to outdoor storage, I suppose that's where we have our most significant pressure, and that's why we got involved in this in the first place. IGE manufactures large fans, and they do it on a pace that meets the demand of their customer, who is somebody that's a general contractor that is running a construction project somewhere. That GC experiences a strike, a delay in construction, an issue with permits. All of a sudden, the order date gets bumped back 8 or 9 months. And IGE has these fans that it's got to take care of. Because of prior regulations that I don't think will burden IGE anymore, such as not being able to restore their fence or secure the property the right way because of the non-conforming use in play. We should be able to secure our yard. But the concern about temporary storage in the containers is still there. I just want to mention that. I know that's a village board issue. We had suggested that the proposed ordinance include the ability of staff, the code enforcement, or I'm sorry, the zoning enforcement officer, to issue a temporary permit for outdoor storage upon the payment of a fee and an inspection at the beginning, during, and towards the end of the permit to make sure you've got all your public health safety issues addressed. Hopefully that'll be considered down the road. Again, that's a village board issue, and it's something that could be in the zoning ordinance, but it's not presently there. It's in a different part of the code under nuisances. But that is one issue that we would like to see, because I think there are people in that district that are going to see those temporary issues come up. One other issue on this that may need to be addressed is wordsmithing on the definition of outdoor storage. One of the questions that we raised with staff that may come up in the future is the question of whether or not storage is occurring outdoors if it's in one of IGE's warehouses or one of the Park District or Township Highway Department warehouses that are not fully enclosed structures. All right, so that definition of outdoor storage says storage occurring in the open. And the question is, what is in the open? If it's inside a building that has 3 walls and a roof, but an open bay, such as on 3 of the larger parcels, ours, the Park District, and the Township, is that outdoor storage? Can we put a container in the warehouse? Right now, as it's written, you can't store a container inside or outside on any properties in Westmont, which is something, again, for the village board. But that's the kind of thing that we're balancing here, because we've got to deal with these fans. We have to have a place to store them. And I think that's something that may come back as part of a PUD or a special use type request. To the extent that there are lawful non-conforming uses, I think Mr. Zemanek touched on some of it. I think there's one significant question. From a private landowner perspective, a private landowner would come in for the special use permit, And let's say it's IGE, and right now we've got a 24-foot deep warehouse that is just off off Quincy, and it screens our outdoor storage area. You can't see the storage area. The area is gravel and stone, compacted like it has been for, decade after decade. And all of a sudden we get into a discussion of, well, we want you to confine that outdoor storage area to an area that doesn't meet our probable need. I suppose at that point we've got an issue, and hypothetically speaking, the application could be withdrawn and we have to rely on our prior non-conforming use. That could prevail at Bales, it could prevail at Rebco's site. Rebco's outdoor storage areas right on the right-of-way at the northeast corner of its building. So you could see some of that. But I will say that overall this ordinance, as it has evolved, has come a long way. It's certainly in a position, I think, where it can be recommended. We support 90% of it. We obviously can't design every provision to meet every circumstance, and that's where hopefully the special use and PUD mechanisms come into play for these uses. IGE's intent is to consider the results after the village board, make sure that it is comfortable with its long-term business plan in Westmont. And in doing that, they look at expansion. There's a vacant lot next door. And that PUD mechanism is absolutely critical. If you were to resort to variations on getting exceptions for these properties, I think every single lot owner down the north side of Quincy would have a real problem with it, because that is a difficult standard to uphold, and there's circumstances that are going to be at issue under the bulk regs, the setbacks, the parking, the loading, that have to be addressed in a PUD context rather than a variance process. I think that's all that I've got. I think Nalini, Bruce, John have done a good job. We certainly appreciate the meeting with Dean and I. Dean Keel handles everything on site here in Westmont for IGE. He's invited all of you to stop by if you want to see operations so that you understand what's going on. They've worked well with neighbors in the past. We're not aware of complaints. There is occasional street loading out of their southeast corner of the building. But it's worked well, and I think this ordinance draws a very careful balance between these long-standing uses and the residents. So thank you for your time on this. I know it's taken a while to get here, but I think it's gotten to where you could probably move it along.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would care to comment on this? Before we go to the commissioners, I would just emphasize one of the points on the outdoor storage is that one thing that would not change is that cargo containers will not, in any event, be approved. So with that, Commissioner Van Buren, would you like to start the?
Yeah, I think this all began when we realized that the zoning that we put on in our new comp plan didn't really reflect what was going to happen or what is really there. And as a result, the property values as a residential are naturally less than if there were manufacturing. So we really want to truly reflect what's there and what we'd hope to be there in the future. In so doing, I really felt that we should not be penalizing the existing business there, because if we hadn't brought this up, they would just keep operating as they had all along without any problem. So it seems to me that a reasonable negotiation has worked out here to see that that our business is not going to be put to test on this, where it's going to cost them a lot to conform to what we want it to be. And so it appears as though, to me, as though that has been affected by this this new ordinance we have here. So I'm all for it.
Thank you. Well said. Commissioner Thomas?
I think this is a example of how businesses and the lawyers and the government get together and manage to stay out of each other's way and get something done that's positive, and good job, all three. That's all I have.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yeah, I would reiterate what Commissioner Thomas just said. I think this seems to have gone in a really positive direction, and I think it's a great example of collaboration that can occur. I do have questions about the new information this month regarding the recommendation to also move towards plan developments versus variances, knowing that we are creating a whole new district to start with. I'm wondering if the staff could comment or help me understand what would be the consequence if we just fine-tune the district more to match this use, since it's the only district in the village and we're making it specifically for this area, versus keeping the district as it is and then applying plan development as a kind of relief valve on top of that.
Good question. And the real problem we were struggling with is the bulk regulations, which would be the setbacks, et cetera. And if any business wished to expand, given the small lot sizes and the very narrow depth, they would need multiple variances. Not only would they need a variance for their existing non-conforming building, because it probably encroaches into multiple setbacks, but the new expansion may also violate several other bulk requirements. And so multiple variances would have to be applied for, and they'd have to show that they're not expanding just to make money, that there's some real hardship that's not self-created. And they'd have a hard time justifying that under the variance standards. Whereas a planned development, or what's called a planned unit development in most places, builds in flexibility and allows developers to seek exceptions from the bulk requirements. And in return, the village can sometimes ask for other public benefits in their development that would help the village or adjoining property owners, et cetera. So it's a more flexible process, and it avoids having to apply for variances and meeting those strict standards.
Okay, so I think I understand. So if we were to increase the bulk standards or loosen them, create ability for more FAR or whatever, then they wouldn't necessarily need the variances, but then we don't get to set the ideal standard. So go ahead.
I was just, when you were done, I was going to explain too, in addition to what John just said, I think John was addressing existing businesses and existing buildings, but when we're writing these rules, part of the discussion is we need to think about new things coming in. So part of the debate we had with some of the property owners and with John Zemanek and among staff was we could write the rules to make everything that's there legal and conforming. 0 yard requirements, maximum FAR, minimal parking, and just say there are no rules, just everything is okay. But then if 5 years from now someone came in with a proposal for a brand new facility, they would say, hey, we don't have to provide any yards, we don't have to provide any parking, because your rules don't require it. So that was, we were trying to accommodate what's there, but we were also trying to say, let's not write rules that would allow something new that we wouldn't be proud of. And that was tough to do. It was a lot of back and forth.
And new development under the village engineering requirements would require a 5-foot side yard drainage and utility easement and a 10-foot drainage and utility easement in the rear yard. So that's why the setbacks are set at 5 feet and 10 feet for side and rear yards.
You're saying whether we have a setback or not, the engineering would require a setback?
Yeah, assuming that the drainage and utility easements were required for new development, and as far as I know, they always are.
It's another reason to just let the setbacks govern then. But that's kind of a joke. But can you help me also then understand, for an existing business that wants to expand, what would be the process for them to enter into a plan development agreement?
They would just apply for, complete a zoning application, apply for plan development approval. Staff would review it just like they would any other project, but instead of listing out let's say encroachments into setbacks or whatever as variances, they would be listed as what are called exceptions or waivers from the zoning ordinance. and it would all be approved through a plan development ordinance and typically a corresponding development agreement.
Okay, and that would not be before the planning and zoning,
No, it would be.
it would be,
Yep.
okay.
This commission's processed many plan developments over the years.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. I think I understand it, and I think it's, again, a good solution to a complex problem. So I appreciate the work that you guys have all put towards it.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Scales?
I don't really have any comments per se, except to say, good job on a lot of hard work to get through this, so thank you.
And Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One for our village attorney, Mr. Zemanek. I've been thinking of it from a different perspective, and that is from a tax perspective. With a potential zoning change, would that automatically trigger any kind of adjustment on their assessed value for either school tax or property tax?
I've spoken to a county assessor, the Kane County assessor, who assured me that they assess property based on the underlying use, not the zoning, with the exception of exempt, I think ag might be the exception, because I think that is treated differently from a tax perspective. If property is zoned, well, they still might look at the use. But, so to answer your question, my understanding is no, this rezoning will not impact their taxes.
Okay, because we've been all focused on making sure that our current business uses there are not impacted in any way, and we've been focused on, the cost and the actual business operations from a ordinance perspective, and we really haven't addressed that at all. But if it changes, somebody could come from the DuPage County Assessor's Office and say, oh, this has changed now, and here's your adjustment. So I just wanted to make sure that that doesn't happen. The other thing is the language. I was thinking of the potential problems with a broad stroke comment in our ordinance that says existing uses are essentially grandfathered, but then it doesn't count on certain items. And we've heard testimony to the fact that we're 90% there, and would it make sense to maybe define that a little better for our existing uses rather than just the broad stroke, so it's clear rather than unclear, because it could be argued at a point in the future saying that, well, I don't need to do this variation or this process because I'm grandfathered in. So I'm wondering if some more clarity gets us to 100%, and do you think that would be necessary? And this is a question really for my colleagues and for Mr. Zemanek.
Yeah, so good question again, and the uses that are classified as special uses, of which there are existing ones in this district, would be IGE that does equipment, product, and component manufacturing. That's classified as a special use. And the public utility government service uses are classified as a special use. And we know that's existing. And we know the other uses there are not classified as special uses because we know what they do. Like there's a landscaping contractor, there's the Bales, which is primarily a hardware retail store. Those are all permitted. So there's really only a handful of properties that are classified as special uses, but we know they pre-exist. So as to those uses, they're carved out in this use list as pre-existing. And I think it's clear to us.
Bales Outdoor Sales. I think Bales Outdoor Sales area would be the only special use, and then you get into outdoor storage, which is something else that you're dealing with. But the outdoor sales would probably be on that list, because they won't be able to get in for anything before their sales season starts.
Yeah, so I think what I was thinking about handling that, Bales has outdoor sales, which we list as an accessory use and as a special use. And we also list outdoor storage as an accessory use and as a special use. Anyone with outdoor storage, including Bales, is going to have to come in for a special use for their outdoor storage. My thought was at that same time, they'd also apply for, their special use would include outdoor sales. So we'd handle it in one fell swoop and they'd be covered.
And are we defining outdoor sales as the exchange occurs outside the building? Or if someone picks up a bag of mulch and goes inside the building and pays for it, is that outdoor sales? Am I nitpicking?
Yeah, maybe
nothing?
nitpicking a little bit, you know, whether they have a register outside or whether the register is inside, the fact is they're gonna have products displayed outdoors for purchase. So a landscaping contractor may have plants, flowers, materials that the public can buy that are displayed outside, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Well, I'd
Bruce, did you wanna
applaud the
comment on-
efforts of everyone involved on this thing. It's pretty complicated when you're looking at multiple properties and trying to orchestrate some sort of document that makes sense. So I applaud all your efforts too, and IGE, and thank you for being here. No further questions from me.
Good. Commissioner Clemens?
I appreciate everyone, what they have done to work with the businesses and grandfather them also in, per se, but also looking at the future. So I think that this is a move in the right direction.
Thank you, and I agree. It seems to me to be a very fair compromise. The negotiations were, there was a lot of give and take on more than two sides, and I think everyone is basically satisfied. It may not be perfect, but it's been several months that everyone's really been working hard on this, so I congratulate everyone. And with that, Chair would entertain a motion to approve PZC 19028, paragraph A, zoning text amendment to the Village of Westmont zoning code to create a limited manufacturing district, M1.
So moved. Sharp?
Do I have a second?
Second, Clemens?
Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Clemens?
Yes.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. And paragraph B, a zoning map amendment to the Village of Westmont zoning map to rezone certain properties located along East Quincy Street between Cass Avenue and Richmond Avenue to M1 Limited Manufacturing District.
So moved, Van Buren.
Second, Thomas.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Clemens?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. Okay. Good job, was passed, and we put that one behind everyone. Thank you very much. And the public hearing on this issue is closed. Next item is new business, PZC 20005, a request from Windy City Cannabis Incorporated for property located at 11 East Ogden Avenue in Westmont regarding the following. A special use permit to allow an adult use cannabis dispensary. And B, site development and landscape plan. The property address is 11 East Ogden Avenue, Westmont. Welcome, sir.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Steve Weissman. I am the company's owner and CEO. I recognize some of you from our meeting earlier in the year, but so this might be a little redundant for those who have already met with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are. I'll then describe our proposed location and our neighborhood impact. So Windy City was founded in 2014, and we currently have 4 locations that serve both medical and adult use customers in the south and southwest parts of Cook County. Our mission is to provide our customers with high-quality cannabis dispensed in a safe and professional environment. So we really aim to create a warm and inviting customer experience, and we try to provide each of our customers with individual and personalized service. Our dispensaries are very professional, they're upscale, they're very modern, and they're warm and inviting. In order to build our culture and execute on our mission, training and education have become the cornerstones of our operations. We are committed to training and educating our staff so that they can properly train and educate our patients, our customers. The amount of training that we do, it's hard to emphasize it here, but it's significantly more than any other business that you've dealt with. In addition to mandatory pre-hire training, they do shadowing, and then annually they have 8 hours of training, plus they take a state-mandated responsible vendor training to make sure that they're meeting all of the state's strict statutory requirements. Part of our shaping our company's culture has been instilling in our staff our company values. And every time I present, I show this slide. Not that I'm going to read each one of our company values to you, but I think it's very important to put it up here because promoting these values is how we instill our high standards in our staff. And as we deal with operational challenges such as hiring, diversity, training, and mentorship, these values really guide our actions, and they shape how we approach those topics. So our products and services, we source our products only from Illinois manufacturers, and that's by state law. And we only buy products that meet or exceed the state's high standards. Our product line is carefully coordinated. It's a wide mix of products, but it's meant to serve every sort of consumer preference available. And we basically carry the spectrum of products offered in the state. So it's not like a customer who comes to us can't find something and instead goes somewhere else. We try to carry the full breadth of what's available. All products.
Could you give us some specifics on those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it varies because it is a product of nature, so it's not consistent. It's not like a widget that gets made every time. But we carry dried cured flour from, as you can see here, this is a list of Illinois manufacturers that we carry. So we carry all of their dried cured flour. We carry vaporized products. We carry edibles, topicals. It really runs the gambit of what's available in the state, and that's constantly changing too. It's sort of an evolving landscape. There's a lot of innovation in the cannabis industry. And all products come to us, they are pre-dosed and pre-packaged in child-proof, odor-resistant containers that are sealed by the manufacturer. So there are not jars of cannabis on the shelves that we weigh out. That's a West Coast kind of model that is not what we do here in Illinois. And so everything is pre-sealed and it's labeled in strict compliance with state law. So the state labeling requirements are as onerous as the packaging requirements, and it's a very high bar. They have all of the testing results. You can trace the product back based on the barcode all the way back to the original seed that was planted at the manufacturing facility. So it's a pretty detailed and complex process. Social equity has become somewhat of a buzzword in our industry, and we focus our social equity efforts on community-based philanthropy and promoting a diverse staff. We focus our community-based philanthropy on organizations in the community that serve social equity causes and impacted persons. And while we're very proud of our employment diversity to date, it's important for us to continually evaluate and regularly check ourselves on how we're doing and improve our hiring initiatives. So our workforce utilization program ensures that our workforce is inclusive and adequately reflects the makeup of the broader community. The workforce utilization program is a way to just hold ourselves accountable. And basically what that does is it takes the available workforce kind of in the broader area and sees how we match up to that workforce and then help us kind of move in either direction to make sure that we're meeting those objectives. And then lastly, we partner with organizations, and there are two that we're very proud of. It's Contextos and Amplify Chicago. They help individuals who are negatively impacted by the war on drugs find their way back into the workforce. And we think that's a really worthwhile and important partnership for us. So this is our site renderings. This is how the exterior of the building and the interior of the building will look. As you can see, our design aesthetic is sleek and modern, and our color palette is pretty simple. We have sort of this darker exterior and lighter interior tones. Our exterior signage will be rather minimal. Our goal is to have it be appropriately sized to reduce any negative attention, but ensuring that our customers can still find us easily. We're not trying to hide out there. Our site is properly zoned for our intended use here in the village and meets all of the village's distance requirements. I can't really see this, I apologize, on the screen here. But I think it's B1, right? Two, sorry. So site suitability. Our site is located in an established commercial district. It's right there next to the Walgreens and across from the Jewel. The 4,700 square foot building provides an ideal footprint for us. We have 19 customer parking spaces on site, and we have contracted for 15 off-site employee spaces. The design of our facility has a 713 square foot display area, which should allow us to have approximately 18 point of sale stations. We will not need 18 point of sale stations, but this is to give us some growth room that will allow us to serve several hundred customers per hour. So, we shouldn't have lines or anything like that. This should adequately meet the demand. And then we also have space for a very large walk-in vault, which provides additional security over having sort of floor safes or something like that. So this is the employee parking. As I mentioned, we've entered into an agreement with the used store at Self-Storage located at 400 Plaza Drive to lease 15 off-site parking spaces that'll be dedicated for our employees.
Would you use a shuttle bus, or how would they get back and forth?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to confirm. I didn't want to say something that's wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, our plan is to have a shuttle. So this is the customer journey. Customers will arrive in that vestibule area. They will be checked in by a security officer who will, who will use state-approved electronic equipment to both check the age of the individual as well as the validity of their ID. So it's they scan the barcode on the back, and it's pretty sophisticated. It's can't be beaten. It's pretty good. And our equipment. Our security guard in the vestibule, once they check them in, will direct them inside into the reception desk, where the receptionist will again verify their ID. We like to have redundancies in the process, and this is one of those places that's very important. The receptionist will enter them in a virtual queue, and when it's their turn, they will be called to the counter where they will make their selection, and they will meet individually with one of our sales associates who can kind of guide them through the cannabis process. They can either view our educational materials while they're waiting in the queue, or if there's no line, they can come right up and the clerk can share that with them. Once they've made their selection, they'll move on to the payment area, to the point of sale systems, and again, a employee will check their ID for a third time, another redundancy, before finalizing the transaction. And part of that is to make sure that the person who ordered previously gets the right products and making sure that the inventory system matches the state's tracking system. And then when they're done, they will depart. We make sure and we train our security staff that as customers leave, to remind them to just be respectful of our neighbors and not consume in the car, don't consume on the property, follow the law, and make sure that they're behaving within the boundaries of the rules. So our community impact, we will have no negative, that's a double negative. We will not have a negative impact on the community. This is a really docile business. It's surprisingly how it's sort of a misnomer that it can cause issues. It really doesn't. The location is part of an established commercial district. We have plenty of parking to alleviate traffic, and we've had 0 criminal instances at any one of our other stores, nothing. In fact, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, we've actually assisted the police force in catching people doing things on adjacent properties because we have such high quality cameras that can capture full facial recognition. So. We also offer a pre-ordering system to manage our customer flow. It's a software called iHeartJane. It's also used as our queuing system. The system creates this virtual queue, and customers, while they're in the queue or at home, can log in, view our materials, and actually place their orders. They don't have to wait for a sales associate. They can place an order online and go straight to the payment area. It's a fantastic system. It really alleviates a lot of the congestion, and the pre-orders help us make sure that, again, we don't have customer wait times. So this is our operational schedule. The state's permissible hours are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., but our typical hours are 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., and we intend to carry those hours forward at this site. Product deliveries occur only during business hours. So, we won't be having delivery trucks at 2 in the morning or something like that. And delivery vehicles are unmarked, and the delivery times are randomized. So this is all by state law, so that there's no routine for someone to follow. Most transactions are in cash, though we have recently rolled out a system called CanPay that is a debit card payment system, which reduces, obviously, the amount of cash we have on hand. Cash isn't safe for any business or for us, so we ensure that we have very regular cash pickups, and those are also done at randomized times and during business hours. We intend to have roughly 30 employees here, with approximately 20 scheduled on site at any time. So, we're keenly aware of the unique security challenges that cannabis presents, and we're committed to implementing systems that alleviate those. We have contracted with a licensed security contractor to design, implement, and monitor our system. We have 24-hour surveillance of all of the areas that contain cannabis, and including our entrances and exits. We provide live video feeds to the Illinois State Police and into our regulator, IDFPR, so they can watch our cameras at all times. All of our cameras are infrared capable, so lighting, though we will have security lighting, it will not impact whether we capture footage. We will appropriately illuminate the property. We will install a suite of alarm systems that include a perimeter alarm, panic alarms, and hold-up alarms. This is all by state law as well, and gets verified by the state. We also run monthly checks to make sure all of this is actually working. We will install a backup generator that will allow our system to remain operational even in the event of a power failure. All of our cash and cannabis products are maintained in our vault, so we won't have cash other than working cash that our clerks are using for transactions. We won't have cash anywhere but inside the vault, and products remain in the vault until they are dispensed to a customer. All of our employees undergo extensive background checks, including state and FBI criminal history checks. Our vendors and contractors are also vetted. And when they're on site, somebody escorts them at all times. We will employ licensed security officers to monitor the facility. They will be the ones that check in the customers, and they will also control our customer flow. Our security officers will perform regular patrols of our perimeter and make sure that our customers are abiding by our code of conduct, which is something I'll mention next. And then we will also develop an ongoing partnership with the police precinct to the extent they want to engage. And we've done this in other places. Normally we designate a delegate to sort of liaison with the police department. And the last thing I'd like to mention is our customer code of conduct. The customer code of conduct is really an agreement between us and our customers and our staff. We use our code of conduct to make sure that our customers treat our staff with respect and that our staff treats our customers with respect. We want to make sure that we are only serving customers that can follow state law and the rules and regulations. And this is sort of how we do it. Any customer that can't consume cannabis safely and appropriately just won't be served again. And you know, we make this very clear. This is in our educational material that we pass out to all customers. So that was my brief presentation. John Bradshaw, who's with me here, can answer a lot more questions about the building and the site plan if you have questions.
All right, thank you. Only for questions. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want us to show you the,
But
we took a quick.
we'll stop there.
Okay.
And staff, would you jump in?
So we have a parking plan, a shared parking plan for 15 employees, and yet you state that there's 30 employees, 20 on site at any given point.
15 to 20 on site. I should be.
I'm just
Yes.
trying to get clarification. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if there are 20 and we only have 15, how's that going to be handled?
That's a good question. We don't exactly have an answer. I don't think all 19 of the customer parking spaces will be utilized. But if it becomes an issue, we'll increase our off-site parking. We're not going to have a problem where there's extra parking and we have a lot full and can't deal with it.
Okay.
That's not good for us either. Yeah, and not everybody comes by car.
Right.
Yeah.
And what are the terms, or what's the term of the parking plan? Is it the first month, 12 months,
Do you know
indefinite?
the term of the parking lease?
The term of it, I believe it's 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, do I have a copy in here? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
And if I could chime in on that parking. So the requirement of the zoning ordinance is that all required parking has to be provided on site. However, if you provide parking off-site, there has to be like a restrictive covenant recorded against title to the property that says we're providing parking off-site.
Sure.
So as part of the, that'll be one requirement, that whatever your parking agreement is, maybe you have a memorandum of parking agreement that gets recorded. And then if that agreement expires at some point, you'd have to provide a renewed agreement or different agreement to the village to make sure all the parking is complied with. And we'll put that in as a condition of the special use ordinance for this.
Yeah, we've done it at other locations and we're happy to do that again, honestly.
Okay, and then I have another question related to state regulations regarding signage. Could you clarify the regulations related to stating the name of cannabis on a sign?
Yeah.
Is that allowed or not?
It's allowed, and our current locations have that.
By state regulations?
Yes, and our current locations have it, and we've been operating for
Perfect. Just
several years.
wondered.
They
Yeah.
can't show the image of any product. They can't do other things in their advertising or signage, but there's no prohibition. I checked, no prohibition on the word cannabis.
Perfect.
Is this your logo?
So that is our logo currently. We are transitioning to a new logo that doesn't have as pronounced leaf. It still has a leaf, but it's less pronounced. And we will use the new logo likely, and it's in the signage plan that we provided.
Is that acceptable to the state, using a leaf like that?
So you're not allowed to have an image of cannabis, but they have not said a caricature or drawing of it is the same thing. So you can't have it like you can't have a picture of marijuana, but you can have this leaf. Many of the existing sites have logos that are derivatives of a cannabis leaf. Ours is a little bit more on the nose with that one. The other one is not on the nose at all. It looks like a star. They're okay with either. We're not changing the signs at our current locations. We are transitioning away for a different reason, for a branding reason.
Now, we will be receiving a separate sign application, and we will be reviewing for all of that as
Yeah,
well.
I believe we submitted a signage plan.
Not first. We'll do that in the building.
Got it. Okay. I think we provided our sign.
Right, and the
Yes.
approval today is not going to include the signage. They're not requesting any variances from the sign code, so when we do receive a permit application, we'll just review it as normal.
Great.
Bruce?
I just have 3 quick comments for the commission to consider. For what it's worth, my recommendation would be to approve the request. I think it'd be a good thing for the village, and I don't think it's going to create any real problems or heartaches. But there are 3 things that I think you should particularly drill down on and question the applicant about. And I'll start with the easiest one first. Site improvements. This will be, I believe, one of the first cannabis-related businesses in the western suburbs. It'll draw attention to our community, and it will bring people to our community. So I think the appearance of this facility and the attractiveness of this facility is important. And so I would encourage you to talk to the applicant about the site improvements, the improvements to the parking lot, the paving, the landscaping that'll be provided, the appearance of the building, the design, the aesthetics, et cetera. So that's the first thing I'd encourage you to question the applicant about. Second, we've already talked about it, is parking, and you've already answered the one question I had about that, and that is how long of a term you would have that off-site parking available for, and it sounds like at least a couple years.
Yeah.
Okay, that puts me at ease. I've seen stories on the news, I'm assuming you all have too, that these businesses do draw a lot of people, particularly when they're new, and we want to make sure that their employees aren't taking up all of the available parking. So I think parking is addressed, but you may want to talk about that a bit more. And then lastly, and perhaps the hardest, but I just want to draw your attention to it, is the issue of impacts on vehicles entering, but more importantly, exiting the site, and whether or not a traffic study is warranted. My own opinion is it is not necessary and doesn't need to be required. However, we do have an outside engineer help us review these proposals. And that outside engineer, and you may see some of his notes in your staff reports, is named Jamie Patterson. He suggested that a traffic study would be warranted to study if there would be any negative impacts on traffic in Ogden related to people coming and going from this business. So there's no recommendation there, but it's something for you to consider and discuss. And that's all I have.
If I could chime in on conditions and concerns before you get to commissioner comments. So as a special use, when it goes to the village board, I'll be drafting a special use ordinance. The village has the right to impose reasonable conditions related to the use and operations as part of the special use process, as long as we're not conflicting with state law. You mentioned hours of operation. That might be a concern to the village, and you stated 10 to 8 o'clock Monday through Saturday and 11 through 5 on Sunday in the application materials.
Yes, I apologize. We have, since our original meeting with you and since we submitted, have extended an hour at our other stores. But if that is a concern, we're.
Well, I think, tell us, extended an hour?
Yeah, we added an hour to the,
So go
we
to
went
9.
10 to 9, and on the weekends, I think we added an hour also, but we might have gone to 10 to 9. I don't have that exactly.
10 to 9 Monday through Saturday and 11 to 6 or 11 to 5 still?
I think it's 11 to 6 right now.
Okay.
But the state permissible hours are obviously larger, and our hours kind of have fluctuated with supply. So when there's more supply, we're open. When there's less supply, we're closed. It is a product of nature, and there is an undersupply at the moment.
And the state allows you to sell up to what time, did you say?
Let me make sure let me just make sure I say it right. It is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
6 to 10, okay.
Under state law.
So that's one issue. The parking agreement we talked about. On-site consumption, the village does not allow on-site consumption, and that will also be emphasized as a condition of the special use ordinance.
We're on board with that.
A condition would be delivery during regular business hours. And then maybe in lieu of a traffic study and addressing some of those concerns, I think both staff and you mentioned, during the first month or two of operations, there's curiosity, higher demand, et cetera, more traffic coming in and out, the parking lot might get jammed. I think your materials said you've provided traffic control either through hiring police or some other measures. Wondering, is that a condition that we should talk about where at least during the first month of operation or during certain hours, traffic control will be provided as necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to do it. It really isn't an ongoing issue. It really is just in the very beginning. It has not been a problem of recent at any of our stores. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, we'll do that either way. We're going to do, we don't want that congestion at the entrance point. So absolutely happy to do it. Happy to commit
As
to
I
it.
understand it, all the news about the long lines and the 5-hour wait was
That's all
kind of in
gone.
the first month of operations when this program first started, and since then, that's not the case at these dispensaries that are currently open around
Yeah.
the Chicago area.
And that is a staff concern. The parking lot is quite small and narrow, and, I mean, I'm just imagining people turning left and not noticing that the parking lot is full and just queuing up and then, crossing the actual roadway.
We're happy to provide them. Like I said, we were going to do it anyway. So it's, yeah,
Sure.
happy to make it a condition to have them in that first month. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone from the public like to comment? Okay, well, let's go to the commissioners. And we'll start with Commissioner Thomas.
Evening.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question that I wrote down, has there been a traffic study done, or is it planned? When I went and looked at the site, we've noticed,
Can you is it possible for you to put your site plan on the,
Yeah.
so that everyone can see this?
Sorry, give me a moment. Would you? No, that's not what you
Sorry.
want. Do we have the site plan digital?
The aerial one,
The aerial? This? We have it on. We have a.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if we have it digital. I apologize. Oh, here, perfect.
Thank you.
okay.
Correct.
And like staff said, it's very narrow property when you look at it from the parking lot ways, not the building wise, but
Yes.
as I pulled in there to look at it, I was counting from right there, the old hash marks in that 11 on each side, that's 22. I had neighbors question that they had 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago had been in Addison, and there were still lines. Neighboring businesses had signs up saying no parking, trying to protect their spots or whatever, or charging $5 for parking in neighborhoods. So I'm envisioning customers overflowing your space, parking in Walgreens, parking in Jewel, and then walking straight across. This is just me, straight across, not crossing at the corner, but coming straight across Ogden. What could possibly go wrong there? And when you leave, are you going to be able to make a left and head west on Ogden? Because the left-hand turn on the Cass starts right about your property line. And I'm seeing problems because people are going to be trying to get through the intersection coming east on Ogden, trying to beat the yellow light, and then all of a sudden, you have people coming out.
Yeah, I understand that.
It seems to me that a study plan needs to be done, or at least looked into a little closer than that.
John, I don't know if you want to weigh in, but I believe Ogden is an Illinois road and requires IDOT to put the right in, right out, their approval. But we're happy to have a security officer who encourages it. Like I said in the beginning, there really aren't ongoing lines at our stores. I mean, when you get a small buildup in the morning before you open of people who are waiting for the open, but throughout the day, there's just not ongoing lines. That it hasn't been an issue at all. And I understand the concern about other parking lots, and we will have security officers whose job it is to make sure that our customers know that they're not supposed to be doing that. And I would encourage our neighbors to tow them. I mean, that's not neighborly, and that's not what they should be doing.
Okay.
There is something that could be done as well. One of the stipulations that we're recommending is to install a sign that encourages traffic to exit and make a right turn. One of the other concerns from staff is that there's only one entry and exit point. And so, you know, if we do have that kind of bottlenecking or, you know, I visualize some things, there's no other way to
Yeah.
exit. So a circulation plan along with the security guards, I think would be a good idea, just simply like indicating to everyone with arrows or
Yeah, and you mean
striping.
paint striping with it? We're happy to put in a stripe.
So you would have a arrow going right or heading east?
So I don't think we're allowed to do-
No, not
Yeah.
on the street, but on your parking lot, on your property.
You mean like a ground thing that just shows the
Yeah,
right?
a
Yeah,
ground-
that's exactly what we would do. We'd
We're
put that
highly
on.
suggesting.
Highly
those.
suggesting it. We can't make people do it, but we're highly suggestive of
right.
it, yes.
Plus you have the officer there
Yeah.
going,
Yep. I mean, listen, it's not good for us to have traffic build up there, people
Right.
that get pissed off and, you know, angry, and it's not a good look for us either. So, yeah, we want to do everything we can to
and
make
the
it
other
work.
thing you said about sales, it was predominantly cash. And you are going, or you have gone to allowing debit?
We do allow
or
debit.
You will?
We do
or
allow debit.
In the future?
Correct. We have a debit system, yeah. We also have an on-site ATM so that people can take out cash if they want to do that instead.
So the ATM would be outside the building?
No, inside, absolutely.
Good. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions, starting with the building. The current building is somewhat dilapidated, and I think this is it's a great thing because you guys are coming in and you're doing great improvements on the outside of the building. I just want to ask, what is the material that you showed in the front elevation?
But I need to draw on my assistant here for help. I can't answer this question.
Hi, my name is John Bradshaw. I'm a principal architect with Cambers and Theodore.
And you have signed in, sir?
I have, yes.
Thank you.
So, the particular materials you're asking?
Yeah, just it looks like siding on the front.
Yeah, it's actually called Resista. So it's a recyclable product that is, believe it or not, it's rice-based. Don't know that process entirely, but visually, I think it takes on kind of a wood look, but without any maintenance required for it. In this case, it's a darker material. So you would have little tiny gaps between the siding. You would have maybe, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch gap between the pieces of siding. And then also on the front, we were replacing those windows that flank the door. So we have a new entry. We also have two new storefront windows on either side of that entry. And then the rest of the building is being coated
Okay.
in more of the color that Windy City uses.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a handsome, simple facade, so.
Thank you.
It looks a lot better than,
Can I ask a question related to that?
sure.
The village has a masonry construction requirement and an exterior masonry construction requirement, which can be administratively waived. Usually we do it for precast concrete, which doesn't technically qualify as masonry. This is a little different. This is just, I guess, an exterior application on top of a masonry building, like a veneer?
That's right, yeah. Currently exists is a slightly split-faced concrete block. So this material, you would have some framing behind it, and then this would go over the top of that. So predominantly masonry still on all sides of the building, with the exception of the entry.
I follow up to that?
Yes.
So how we've been handling that requirement for the last year or so is our ordinances do require buildings to have masonry exteriors. That requirement can be waived if two things happen. One, if the Fire Prevention Bureau person says that the required fire rating is satisfied, and that's the foundational, the fundamental requirement that has to be satisfied no matter what. And then two, if the appearance of the building is attractive as determined by you. So if you look at their elevations, hear their explanation of what they're doing, and approve it and say that's attractive and acceptable for this community, and if the Fire Prevention Bureau says it meets fire rating requirements, then I will, the ordinance gives me the power to administratively waive the masonry requirement. But if you want a masonry look, if you want the appearance to be a brick building, or the bottom half, or the corners, or whatever, speak up now and make it clear to the applicant that you want a masonry look. Won't affect the fire rating, that requirement has to be satisfied no matter what. But purely for visual and aesthetic purposes, if you approve what they're proposing tonight, then I'll grant the administrative waiver from the masonry requirement. So I just want people to be clear about that procedural detail.
Thank you.
Okay. Have you said that Windy City currently has 4 locations operating? And how many of those are medicinal right now?
They're dual. Both of them are med and rec. They serve both customers.
So there's 2 locations for?
No, there's 4 locations. Each location serves both medical
okay.
and recreational customers.
Okay. Have you guys ever had a break-in
Never.
with one of those facilities? My last question is the parking. I think somewhere in our report that we got from staff, there was question about whether there was a variance required for the front setback. Is that known or still unknown?
Well, it is an existing parking lot, and so we're not requesting a variance to the requirement that there be no encroachments into the front setback. Along Ogden, it's 30 feet, but at this point, because there are no modifications to the parking lot, we're not having them request a variance.
Okay. The staff report also says that there's 11 required customer spaces and then employee parking depending on your range that you've given. I don't see 88 any accessible spaces on your site plan. Can you guys address that?
Yes, I can address that. I think if anything, we may have to modify the site plan to reflect that. Of course, we have to comply with all of that. So the grading for those stalls would be compliant. Access to the store from the parking would be compliant in that case. So there would, from what I've seen, I think we won't have any issues with grading. It'll just be a matter of striping to make sure that the handicap stalls are indicated.
Okay. And follow-up question to that is, what is the north-south oriented rectangle that's to the west of the front of the building?
Are you talking?
Yeah, that guy.
That looks like
Loading?
West elevation?
Yeah.
So when there is no loading going on, a vehicle could potentially turn around there and head out?
Yep.
Okay.
Deliveries are rather infrequent. They're not, it's not like 10 a day or anything like that. I mean, it's,
But daily, they're daily?
yeah, I mean, daily or, maybe 2 every other day, something like that.
Okay.
It is randomized and it is done by the state.
Okay. I won't ask for your schedule.
Sunday schedule.
That's all I have. I think overall, when I read this and looked at the location and the site plan, it seems to be a great match for this first new facility in Westmont. It's on a regional corridor, which is awesome. It's in the right district. You guys aren't asking for special variances, and you're fixing up an aging building. So I'm in favor of this. I think it's maybe the best we could have hoped for as a first go at this use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Scales?
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple of quick questions, a couple for you and then just a couple for staff too. So have you done any research into some of the other mature marketplaces like a Colorado or an Oregon to see how long that initial, I guess, mad rush period kind of takes to wear off in terms of having an overabundance of people standing in line?
Yeah, so it really does vary. Besides this business, I also own another cannabis company that has 30 locations in 13 states across the country. So we're one of the larger operators in the United States. And I can tell you from our experience, it's highly dependent on the community and the idiosyncrasies of the individual location. So it's not, there's no like standardized thing that I can tell you it's, a week and it falls off. But I can say that it did take less than a month from when recreational began, which is, I gotta think, peak demand. You have 50 years of pent-up demand that all got released on the same exact day, which is why you saw all those lines. Now I think the lines you're currently seeing, or that occasionally exist, are due to spikes in product. All of a sudden, product is released because of shortages. But once the product smooths out, the purchasing smooths out, and it's like any other business. It doesn't
So
have.
there's a stabilization of market supply.
Yep. So I can't imagine more than a month. That would be very shocking to me.
Okay.
At worst, it would probably be 6 months to a year, because that's how long they're saying it will take for the supply to catch up to the demand. So right now, if all of a sudden a supply comes in, there could be kind of a rush hour while a store is stocked, and that
Yeah.
could last for a while during intermittent periods.
So we own a manufacturing facility here as well, or I do, separate business. That manufacturing facility is undergoing an expansion, which should be done in the next 2 to 3 months-ish, which should help us ease some of the demand or some of the supply burdens. And then the time it takes for us to remodel and build this facility and get inspected by the state is every bit of 3 months. And so I don't suspect there'll be the same shortages by the time we open.
Well, but then there's the grow period. and
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
All that.
That's a good point. That was the question I had. What is the grow period? Is it
4 to 6 month cycle, depending on the type of plant.
and that's including
Dry cure, shipment.
dry cure, the whole
Yeah.
from
4 to
when
6
it might
months,
be?
somewhere in that range.
Okay. Okay. Is Addison the nearest dispensary?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I would say Addison is probably the closest, or I have one in Justice, which is pretty close.
There's also one, not yours specifically, but just in general.
Justice is closer, yeah.
So
Oh, Windy
Justice-
City is in Justice.
Right, so you're in Justice, there's another company in Addison.
Addison, correct.
Are you aware of any others that are in the nearby region?
Not that I'm aware of.
There might be a medical one in River Forest or something. I'm not sure that I thought I read about, but I'm not.
There's one in Oak Park.
Park, yeah.
But I would say Justice is closer than Oak Park. Yeah.
And so the process for you getting approvals, do you need to meet village approvals prior to
Correct.
obtaining the license?
Correct.
So everything's contingent?
Yeah, once we have the special use, we can go ahead and apply for the state license. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion. It's mandated by law that we get an additional license for every currently operating license. So we would be using one of those additional licenses here. They just have to review our plan and schedule an inspection, and they make sure that everything kind of matches with state law. And that takes a couple months, but should align with our build-out time. So we should have the operational approval by the time the build-out is complete.
And are you competing with other folks that are trying to get something within the same region? Or is there?
Only if they're within 1,500 feet of us. So
100
you guys would have
okay.
to approve somebody else.
Okay. All right, and then I guess for staff, a quick question. This was previously a daycare center?
It was a kindergartner, that kind of thing.
Kindergarten? Maybe before my time, I was just curious. Do we know how the traffic was impacted there? I would think that,
I think that would be a question for, I've only been here about a year. That is why a traffic study would be recommended in that regard. But what I do know, or what I understand, is that those 3 exits, the Walgreens, the school, and the Las Palmas, or what used to be a Dunkin' Donuts, those accesses or the points were already there. And, the police have had no comments as far as accidents or any issues like that. So that's what we're basing our proceeding on.
and theoretically, you get past the busy initial rush.
Right.
However many months that takes, it would subside down back to what it maybe was like.
Right, that's the hope. And as well, I guess the traffic is ongoing during the day. It is not in the early morning hours or rush hour. It's kind of escaping that, which is why I would recommend having the evening hours be a little bit pushed up, maybe to 4 or 5, rather than into 6 or 7. So that it's all during the day when traffic is in and out multiple hours of the day.
Okay. Then I have just one process question, and bear with me, I'm new on the board.
Yeah, no,
So if it's passed, if we vote yes today, and they have deliverables like recommended for a traffic study that staff is saying, or, you know, whatever the additional items might be, are those required to be deliverable upon village board vote, or presented then, or?
So I think what you're talking about are special conditions that
Right.
we would put into the special use ordinance that's presented to the village board. So hours of operation, for example, could be regulated by ordinance, which would apply once they open. Having a recorded parking agreement would be a condition of them getting their occupancy permit, that they've actually obtained a parking agreement and had that recorded. So most of these would be a condition for them to open, that they meet them and that they continue to meet them throughout their course of operation. Otherwise, the special use permit could be revoked after a hearing.
But if you require or request a traffic study be conducted, then that would be probably a continuation of this case to the following month for the PZC, so that you can evaluate it and then come up with a vote based on that, if that is something that you want to do. So there's two separate things. The stipulations are after you've voted or considered it, then you can come up with conditions of approval, and then those get sent to the village board. But if you want some additional information in order to make a good decision, then we can table the case to the next month.
You know, we would request that, no disrespect at all, that you didn't make that request. We're trying to move as fast as we possibly can to get this facility opened, and that would obviously delay us, and I think unnecessary. So.
And you're
Point of
under contract to buy this, correct?
Yes, correct.
Contingent upon
Yes.
license approval, et cetera.
All of the approvals from local and state.
All right, that's it. Thank you. I have no further questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy.
Of course, I have a ton of questions.
Oh, man.
Can you put the other site plan up that shows the configuration? It's the landscape plan, please.
The landscape.
Shows the configuration and the underlying aerial.
John, I will need your help on this one.
Just can you slide it down so we can see Ogden Avenue? There you go.
That works.
Bruce.
Got it.
Why am I doing this wrong?
Other
No, I
way.
think Ogden's from here. I think, right, like that.
You're good.
Is that good?
S1 site plan, or your,
The landscape plan, the one that has the picture
Yeah,
of
this
the configuration.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just share some expertise with you. Basically, what you have here is you have a dual taper on Ogden Avenue. One is eastbound, going the left-hand turn lane that goes into Jewel, and the other one is the left-hand turn lane that goes from Ogden to southbound Cass. Both of those tapers, it's a dual taper. It is one of those golden rules by IDOT that you cannot have a full access if you're going to improve the site. So a restricted access, if you were to go to a IDOT for a permit, they would restrict this access similar to that of what they did at Walgreens, which you can see right next door with the right in, right out, because you can't go. So what happens is that traffic coming from the east has to stop in the taper lane and block other traffic to make the traffic motion, the left-hand turn to go south into this site. So that's the reason why IDOT would restrict this access. Not saying that they would, but based on my experience, I'm telling you, that's probably what would happen. I think a traffic report is vital to this decision. I really do, because you're gonna get people turning in, and I know it's something that, you know, you're gonna try to control it by having off-site parking, but what's gonna happen is that users are gonna come, they're gonna see the parking lot is full, and they're gonna scatter. And they're gonna scatter to Walgreens, they're gonna scatter to other business uses. And it's gonna be tough to control that. So even though you have off-site parking allotted, based on what we've seen elsewhere, it's going to be difficult.
Our average transaction on our opening day, which is the only day I have real data for, we got it down to 4 minutes a transaction. I just don't see
I
all of
respectfully
these
disagree.
parking spaces
Okay,
being full.
I just don't agree, okay? It's as simple as
No,
that.
no, I understand.
That I believe that a traffic study is required. It's a key component of this. How are we going to get a garbage truck in and out of there to service you?
How did they do it now?
I mean, they have to back out on Ogden, or how are they going to do that?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, and how big are your delivery trucks?
They're tracker vehicles. They're normal car size.
They're normal car size.
Yeah, they're not like 18-wheelers or anything like that. They're
Okay.
they're SUVs with like cages in the back.
Okay. How far is it to the off-site parking that you're talking about? So it's not walkable.
No. Well, I mean, 6/10 of a mile, but yes, no. We're not
So
planning on it.
is this bus going to be running all the time, or do you have shifts for your employees? Or
We have 2 shifts.
Two
So not
shifts.
all the time, no.
So part-timers wouldn't be required to like come in at like a few hours during peak hour?
No, we don't do that.
Okay. Do you do any, I know when you have high volume like this, that you can actually make appointments. So if you want to get something, you can call and you can make an appointment to come in to pick up your
Yeah, you don't need to make an
product.
appointment. You can just pre-order online and
just
just come
saying
grab it.
that to help mitigate the traffic.
I'm saying, sorry, we have it, you don't have to make an appointment. You can pre-order and it's just waiting for you when you show up. So it's pre-order for pickup. Yeah, no appointment. You don't have to say like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. You come whenever during that day.
Okay. The ADA requirement, how many are required for this kind of volume?
Just one.
For that number of parking stalls, only 1 handicap stall is required.
Okay, Bruce?
It's one stall.
Yeah. Something came up a while ago on another application, if I'm referring to your sign. It has that symbol. By the way, a little IT note, my screen's not working, by the way, just so you know I'm paying attention. So, you have this symbol, okay, and it came up on another applicant not too long ago down on 63rd Street, and that was determined to be part of the sign requirement as far as the square footage goes. Does this meet this, or I know it's gonna come back later for signage, but it was determined back in the other application that in fact was part of the sign requirement, the symbol on the side of the building. It's on this drawing, but not on the other drawings.
I don't know whether it does, but we'll conform to whatever the rules are.
And if they don't, they just have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
process a
No,
variance and see if it gets approved.
I'm just reviewing what I see, and,
Yeah.
you know, so it's something, I know it's come up before. We
I
had long
appreciate it.
discussions over it.
We'll make sure we know the
You
answer
know,
next time.
is a symbol part of the sign, and that we've already kind of figured that out.
Appreciate that.
The other thing too is that I look at your site plan, I look at these elevations, there's windows all down the side, which is actually behind the other buildings. Are you gonna have security, inside for those windows?
We have glass breaks, so that if someone breaks them, we know. We have motion sensors,
Okay.
and it's a combination of a bunch of different tools. We also put film so you can't see in, so, yeah, security film.
Okay. What about site lighting? I didn't see any site lighting here.
All right.
I think we submitted, or we did submit something to somebody, I don't know, to you, okay. So in that case, we submitted just the 2 lights that are up front, assuming there was a reasonable amount of light in that parking lot now.
Staff?
So just by way of explanation, to try to minimize all of the sheets and pages and quantity of documents included in your packets, we haven't been including photometrics plan. Staff, Nalini and I review photometric plans and make sure that they meet the village requirements, that the intensity of light is low enough at the lot lines. And we would do that for this if we haven't already. I don't know if we've reviewed your photometric plan or not. For some other cases in the last year, we've rejected photometric plans and told the applicant to revise them to lower the light intensity. So we do that administratively. If you as a group, though, want to see photometric plans going forward, let us know, and we can add that to the package. But that's one of the things we've been keeping out and just doing an administrative review of.
And we'll conform to what, it's not necessary for our security. Our cameras are, like I said, are infrared capable, so they will work regardless of lighting. So we are amenable to whatever lighting you
Yeah,
desire.
the only reason why I bring this up is because the next story use, that's the Las Palmas now? Yes. Is a restaurant use, and how would your site lighting impact that restaurant? And
I don't think we were intending on having, like bright security lighting. I mean, I think we were gonna have it conform to
understood.
normal.
Okay, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure, well, staff's obviously gonna
Yeah.
review that.
And it's a 0-foot candle requirement in Westmont. It's really strict.
Exactly. So, and it's so close to the lot line, the parking is like right there, so
Yeah.
it's kind of tough to meet that standard. So it's something that, since I don't have my screen, could you step one step to the right? Thank you. Maybe one of the things that you could do to improve this site tremendously is for a crossover access easement to one of the other access points. You're so close to the other entrances, and it's so restrictive, that what might help is be able to actually have the capability, either through Walgreens or Las Palmas, to cross over into their parking lot. That might lend itself to a huge improvement to your operation if you're able to circulate and come back out without any difficulty. Have you explored that
I
opportunity?
don't believe we have, and I don't really wanna comment on it without asking.
Yeah, I mean, the only way we'd be able to do it is through Walgreens. It's unlikely to get
I think that would exacerbate any concerns they had that our people would be using their spaces.
I think also there might be a drive-through along that area, I'm not sure, on the east side of Walgreens. So regarding the signage, I just want to clarify that we are stipulating or recommending a stipulation for consideration by the commissioners that all of the signage comply with our sign code. No variances allowed, especially because of the pylon. So that's just something that I'll point you to. Item number 3 on page 10 kind of discusses that as something that we typically do when we have these cases go through, unless there's something that we in advance see that we can support the idea of providing for a variance request. But in this case,
So I think our plan was to remove that sign, but keep the post and put a new sign on the,
the requirement of the sign code is to remove the pylon sign and replace it with a ground sign
ground sign.
to sign code specifications, which also will enhance and beautify the area and so on and so forth. So it'll be compatible with,
To a monument.
something compatible with the facade that is being considered.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same, yeah.
That was covered in the EDC meeting. On the-
All great.
the
Good to go.
Monument sign is mandatory. So.
Perfect, happy to do it.
Commissioner Lavoy, you have more.
Yes, and last, I just have been reading through the findings of fact, and I really don't agree with criteria number 1, because I think that because of the traffic and the lack of the report, I know that the neighboring properties, by looking at it, they're gonna be impacted by the users coming to this facility and not having anywhere to park. In addition to that, I think that they're going to explore opportunities across the street, and then we get people crossing the street not at the crosswalk. There's a lot to be considered here, and I really think that the traffic report is necessary, not only from a vehicle standpoint, but a pedestrian standpoint. I really think that you're gonna get people coming across the street in the middle of the road and not at the intersection to come to this facility. And I think that, you know, the customers are gonna be parking in other parking lots because it's inadequate. And even though that they've done the best, that's why I ask you about the timing of, you know, could you schedule times for your customers to come? So they come, and it's a flow where you don't have those peak times.
We do have a little bit of a bimodal distribution of customers, a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, but it is not peak, it's not like this. It does not look like that. It is very smooth across the day.
Yeah, okay. And I also don't agree with criteria number 2. I think that this is gonna create, you know, if it is like it is now, we are gonna have accidents on Ogden Avenue. there's no doubt that that's gonna happen. And that's what, we all try to avoid. So, cars have to stop in the middle of the road, in the middle of the taper, in the middle of the turn lane to gain access coming from the east. And it's a problem, and you can see that IDOT addresses that by restricting the access. And I really want to see a report before we vote on it.
Yes.
A question, I agree with all your points, but something occurs to me. If the village requires them to do the traffic study, do we already know what the result would be? And it would be that they'd have to install a driveway like Walgreens has.
Yeah, that's a good question, Bruce, and I really believe that that would be the case.
And
But
if that
that's-
is the case,
But that
and,
doesn't make me the authority
Right,
either,
right.
so.
and this is just for the group to consider, if we think that would be the outcome, we might discuss just saying, install that, and you don't have to do the study, just install that kind of a driveway, but.
Well, the only problem with that is I really think it's a pedestrian issue too. I think it's more of a, access and it involves the garbage, it involves the, how are they gonna turn around and come back out without a second access? It's gonna include, the vehicle traffic and how that's gonna impact. And I think that it's really warranted to address all those issues.
The other issue with that is that if we start opening up that access point for consideration for changing it, then we have to bring in IDOT, and they're gonna look at those two access points within a few feet of each other, and they might recommend that cross-access and so on, so it might be more of an involved project.
But that
will
makes sense to me.
delay. Although.
It's a better project if you do that.
Well, two thoughts, and one, I think we'll definitely need John Zemanek to weigh in on regarding cross-access. One, I don't think we can force someone to get cross-access,
Or can I not?
even if they're getting a special use permit, but I'm not positive about that. Secondly, I think both of the adjoining properties have issues. I think there is a drive-through to the west at the Walgreens that would complicate a cross-access easement going to the west. And it may not show on the aerial, but Las Palmas is literally in the process of adding a patio outdoor seating area on the front side of their building, which is the north side, which would presumably be where a cross-access easement would be to the east. So there may not be the ability to provide cross-access, and then the legal question, I don't know if we can require it.
I cannot require it, and, a Walgreens, for example, may have the same fears of, that just encourages people to park in their parking lot and use, and walk over to this location. But normally, the village does require cross-access easements for property like this, but again, can't force it.
Yeah, from my perspective, if it requires a variation for landscaping or a front yard setback of any kind to put it out near Ogden Avenue, if you have that crossover, it's a better project. Much more fluid in the ability to make those turns and negotiate the corners better. But in any case, I'm not in favor because of these reasons. I think that the pedestrian traffic is a big concern. What's gonna happen is that I anticipate that people in the restaurant are, you can't park here, you can't park here, you can't park at Walgreens. Then it's gonna happen across the street, and we're gonna get people crossing the street. It's problematic with the volume, really unquantified volume of what you expect to have here. And we're not the experts, I just can see that there's potential here, and that one component that I would have liked to have seen in this, your application would be the traffic study.
So one other thing to just add to help alleviate some concern you have is, part of the reason why there's lines we're open is there's only 30 stores available in the whole state. There are another 125 being, 50 currently being permitted and 75 more being awarded on May 1st. So that should alleviate a lot of the congestion as well, because there'll be more access points, not all focused on the 30 existing licensees.
That's great, I just want the best solution for Westmont.
No, I just meant there'll be more spots, so not everyone will flood to this location. There'll be more
Understood.
places for them to go.
Point well taken. I'm just saying that this is problematic for us from that perspective, and we're going to have I would say, what, a majority of your folks are gonna come from the east, I would think. So
I couldn't say.
that means they have to, you know, if it's, even if it's a restricted access, they're gonna have to go turn around somewhere.
Sorry, do you want to? Do you mind if he comments?
I swore,
Not at all.
can I address some of this?
Certainly, come to the podium.
Hi, Dan Tosk. I've spoken in front of you before, early on in the process, and I just want to refresh that I've worked with Windy City as a consultant, real estate broker, so I know some of the issues of what we're dealing with here, but also a patient of Steve's at Justice and a caregiving card holder for my son. And I was at Justice today, and it's March 10th, and I went 3 weeks ago for my son's stuff, and I went on January 15th. So I've been right in the middle of the chaos that's going on in Illinois. We had even though Illinois is a successful operation, we opened 35 on January 1st, and then we're getting to 55. That's creating the lines. But in those three experiences, the first time I went to Justice, there was a line out the front, there was crowd control, it's got a 2-row parking facility in a typical strip center, it was full, and I had trouble parking. 3 weeks ago I went, there was 2 adult use patients outside waiting in the, it was the middle of a business day. I parked no problem in a full strip center, and I walked right in as a medical patient. Today I went to Justice, no one outside, walked right in. I could have parked in 15 of their 30 parking spaces today in the middle of the day. So I just want to give you that perspective as an actual, I'm in Illinois, that was a crazy rush on day one as he described, but the day part of what they do transactionally in the in and out in 4 minutes, you know, I think this is twice as big of a footprint as any existing dispensary in Illinois right now at 4,600 feet that's operating in terms of its sales floor, and it's probably twice the parking of any Illinois dispensary right now. This site is chosen for what we think the cannabis dispensary of the future's volume is going to be as real estate people and partner. So
The adjacent businesses, and it's.
yeah, so I hope that just a better on the ground perspective of the parking problems a little bit.
I appreciate your comments, and I do recall your previous testimony, and it's very compelling, and my issues are really not related to the need to service people like you and your family and others like you that have this need. I just want to make sure it's safe, and I want to make sure it's the right thing to do, and we apply what we know and the best that we can do to make this site the best that it could be, and I'm not seeing that tonight.
Sorry, I just wanted one more, just because I'm in the area and I'm a Walgreens customer next door. So I think that we can't, and to the points that you're making, I think the fact that Walgreens, it has been established that they right next door to us have an established right in, right out as a customer. There's no chance I can cheat that as a customer. I've tried. It's an insurmountable median on the right in, right out. Right. That customer does start, their only way into Walgreens, if you're coming from the east, is to go to the Cass stoplight, which isn't even depicted here, is here in the queue. And so, to your point, I know it's designed that way, but the longest I've ever waited in a queue line at rush hour for Walgreens is about...
You need to come back to the microphone.
The queue turn lane for Walgreens extends about twice as what you can see on the aerial here. And this, the right in, right out for Walgreens is an insurmountable median that you can't cheat off of. So as a customer, I am forced to go to Cass, take a left and access it off Cass, and then exit right out onto Ogden because I live east. So I have to abide by that right in, right out, and it's there and established. That means that every time I've ever been in that queue line, there's never been the circumstance that you've described where I'm queuing even close to where the daycare used to be. And I've seen them dropping off kids when that was open, and it just, I get the point that problem it's designed to offset that, but it didn't exist when the daycare was open. It hasn't existed as a Walgreens customer since I've been.
But the businesses are totally different from each other, and for people that are traveling from the east to travel into this site have to stop within the taper on both sides, both east and west, to get into the site. That means if the light is green at Cass Avenue in Ogden, there's free-flowing traffic flowing from the west to the east. You have to wait to turn south into your site. And I just think that we need to have that report to address that, and also the pedestrian traffic.
One last thing on this. I would argue that the daycare is much more peak because they drop kids off all at the same time and pick them up all at the same time. Their use was not smooth, and if they didn't experience it, I just don't see how we would have the same issue.
Bruce?
So if I were to try to summarize the dilemma that you as the Plan Commission have to resolve here, is you have three choices. You can approve the site plan as it's proposed with the driveway as it's configured. You could require a traffic study, and the applicant would have to go and hire someone to do the traffic study and give that report to us, and we would bring it to you at a future meeting of this group. That's the second option. Or the third option would be to go out on a limb and assume that we know what the recommendation of a traffic study would be, which would be to create a right-in, right-out only driveway, like Walgreens has, and impose that as a requirement now. So I'm not advocating for any of those three, but those are at least three options that I'm aware of that you should probably resolve for yourselves.
Ms. Johnson?
There's a possible fourth option, a limited traffic study or traffic count, circulation pattern analysis by one of our outside engineers to be conducted following this meeting, following a vote, if it is in the affirmative, and then we would have our engineer review before it's placed on the village board agenda. So subject to the results of that traffic study, if that's something that you want to do as an alternative to not delay this further. If that makes any sense.
What do you think of that, Chris?
I just think it's a critical design issue. I think we don't know what the volume is gonna be. We don't know, how many people are gonna drive there and when. It's a guess. Or how long those peak hours are gonna be, how long the peak time is gonna be before things filter out when other facilities come online.
Commissioner LaVoy, listen to me. This has been a drive-in Subway restaurant. It's been a florist. It's been a daycare center. The same condition that you're talking about here has existed, and all of those. Going from very busy with the drive-through there, and it's never come up as an issue. Now, I agree that probably right out is the answer on this. But a traffic study is gonna tell us it should be a right out. But either that or it shouldn't be there at all. But what do you want?
No, they can't tell you can't have an access. It's gonna be restricted in some manner.
Okay, but if we can restrict that right here and now.
I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm just saying that I don't know.
Okay, so you're gonna get a
component.
traffic study, and what's that gonna tell you what we don't know now?
That's gonna tell you that's gonna project the volumes.
I know, but we've seen it happen with the 3 different kinds of business at this location.
Yeah.
People have lived with it. It has not been a problem for our police.
I'm just,
So what are you gonna know that you don't know now?
Well, here's what we can do. If there's a split of opinion on whether a traffic study is required, certainly it's a reasonable request by a commissioner, and when the public hearing is done, I'd suggest that before going to findings of fact and voting whether or not to recommend the special use, that the first order of business is make a motion to postpone this in order to request a traffic study and see where it goes. And
I want to hear what we haven't heard all the testimony yet.
well, of course, we have to hear from everyone else, but that's why I said at the end of the public hearing.
Yeah.
Tom, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just had a question for Commissioner LaVoy about the pedestrian. A traffic study, if it was conducted, would it address the pedestrian issues crossing? What would it say about pedestrian issues?
I don't know what it's gonna say.
I mean, I'm asking because you're more familiar than I am with traffic studies and their scope, but I've never seen one address pedestrian access, and I'm not sure what solution we could generate to stop pedestrians from crossing the street. I understand the concern for like this heyday when it first opens.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we can do about it or what a traffic study would show. But my second question about a traffic study is what, like was just said, we don't know what the anticipated volume is going to be. So what will a traffic study
It will
show
quantify that,
us? But based on what?
based on other uses, other locations.
But what we're saying is that the volume skyrockets for a very short time and then goes back down. So are
That's
they gonna
what-
give us a
that's
study
what-
based on the high point or the average?
Sorry, when we've done traffic studies, we actually give them the projections, and we base them off of, comparable stores we have. So we provide them with the data they're
The
using.
projections are coming from you, not the study.
Correct.
But the projections are your average, not your opening day.
No, of course not. We're not building a building based on the opening day rush, right? We'll put people there to handle that, and then we'll deal with it for regular operations.
Chris, any more questions?
No.
Commissioner Clemens?
Okay. With the aesthetics and stuff of the building, I think that you've done a good job on that. A few things that I'm concerned about, well, with the parking spots, and I think you said there would be a few hundred at one point. One concern, though, is, this might seem silly, but snow plowing, where are you gonna put the snow? Because I know in the village here, we have issues of where do you put, the snow, because that's gonna take away from your 17 parking spaces.
I don't know that we've thought about that.
Something you may want to consider on that, because that, you have to put it
Yeah,
somewhere.
no, that's a great point.
Each island of one.
Yeah.
I am not an expert on snow storage, but I think in this particular parking lot, you could probably fit all of your snow into one parking space, which wouldn't detract from your requirements. So I think that's ultimately what would happen, not to mention the fact that you have perennial plants here. You could pile some of that into that new landscape area.
So you can do that, okay, because it is a concern, because you only have 17 parking spaces. Of that, one is ADA. And then, I think at one point you said there was a few hundred people per hour.
I was just saying that we could, I was
Okay.
trying to make it clear. We have the capabilities to service that many. I do not expect that.
Okay,
By
I
any stretch of
misunderstood
the
you, okay.
imagination. Just, I
I
was
was
saying
like,
the
wow.
size of the retail floor space is very large here. I mean,
Okay,
there's no display counters, right? I mean, there are these displays that are like the millwork in front of between the customer and the associate, but there aren't like, there's nothing on the wall, you don't go pick it off the wall and it's not like Walgreens where you walk down an aisle and grab it yourself. You walk up to the counter, they get it from the back. So the size of our retail space is very large relative to what we need. So I was saying it in the sense that we can service that many, there will not be people outside standing around the block other than in this initial.
so is there something, something you may concern that you might, as an option, I know about restricting, turning right and all that stuff, which would be good for traffic flow, but possibly making an agreement with Jewel across the street, talk to them about using across the street and pay for someone to help people cross.
We tried to find our adjacent neighbors to see if they're willing to let our employees park there. So we have reached out to our neighbors about parking, and they were not receptive to us leasing spaces, which is why we picked the place we did further away. But I think part of it is they're concerned about our use and it's new, and we'll continue those conversations, and we'd rather move it closer and have more spaces.
Yeah, just for temporary, just to see if there's something you could do agreement, because I know like they have the trees and stuff, they sell Christmas trees and that part of the lot, and possibly and then provide someone to help cross.
We're happy to have conversations with them about it and continue those, but they just really weren't receptive in the beginning here, and I can't speak to why they weren't. But
Okay. But and also the hours, I do understand that not restricting the hours to 4 o'clock or something like that, because, I understand because of traffic, et cetera, but I understand your clientele probably need to come also after work.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
that would be my
closing at
understanding
4
why.
would just not be we just couldn't do
Okay.
it. If that was the business hours, we just couldn't do this, so.
Okay.
And it has to be for people to come, kind of in the morning and afterwards.
Okay. All right, that's the only comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Van Buren?
Yeah, you kind of heard my feeling on the traffic study already, but I don't think there's anything we can learn that we don't already know. This place didn't fall out of the sky. It's been there a long time with varying conditions, and it's, I'm sure it's a problem to a certain extent to whoever's using the lot, to the extent that they've adjusted their entry and exit to what would be sensible. So I know that no matter what you do, no traffic study is going to tell you how many cars are going to come when that surge comes. And that's all speculative. But your experience tells us that it's going to be there. And so we're going to have to deal with that and deal with it properly, because you've done it before. You'll anticipate what you need to do it. So I think that the right thing to do would be to have write-out only and post that yourself without having to go through
Yeah, we were gonna,
IDOT.
we're happy to paint the arrow
Yeah.
stripe for it to be
And
right arrow.
I think that would suffice. And
Yeah.
that's all I have.
Thank you. Staying on that same line, I would like to see and encourage both a yellow arrow to the right and a pole sign like Walgreens has right next door on their pork chop showing right turn.
Sure.
Uh,
I mean, I have no problem with it. Is that
Well,
allowed with the IDOT? to put
On
up
your
a sign?
private property.
On our private
It's
property?
on your property. It's-
Okay, I just didn't want to say yes to something I couldn't do.
What about an engineered barrier or pork chop? Is that something they can do, right?
Not on
have
the
to be-
parkway. That would have to be reviewed by IDOT and bring in engineers and so on.
because then nobody could make a left turn off Ogden.
Right?
So on the private property, on the private side, behind the lot line, you could stripe and put a sign.
Oh, so the pork chop would actually be in the right-of-way?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we could require them to paint the pavement with an arrow, and we could require them to put a sign up that says right turn only. None of that's enforceable. The police couldn't ticket someone for violating it, but it would hopefully help and encourage people to turn right, but people could ignore it and not get ticketed. If we wanted to require them to put in a physical barrier, a pork chop like Walgreens has, they would need to get a permit from IDOT, and that does add some engineering and some time, but if we think it's important and will promote public health, safety, welfare, you could impose that requirement, and then they would have to go through the permitting process with IDOT to get the permits to install that kind of a barrier or pork chop.
And the issue I see with that is that IDOT is also looking at the proximity between the different driveways. And I think at this point, being that it's so close, it may actually trigger other things and potentially cause the project not to be possible, so.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, Chris,
They have to have access.
go.
I was just gonna ask Nalini, this property has to have access. I don't think IDOT could prohibit access. I think the most, either we could require a pork chop, right in, right out only, or if IDOT got involved, they might require that, but I don't think there's any scenario where, they have to have access to the site.
True. It is a private lot, and it does have to have access.
Well, since there's only the one entrance off Ogden, I'm concerned that if we mandated a pork chop entrance, some innocent person is going to attempt to make a left turn heading west on Ogden and cause problems, accidents could ensue. I'm just not sure that
There's multiple traffic motions that are to be considered. One is the outbound traffic, which you're going to try to control by a sign that says right turn only. There's also the inbound traffic that you can't control. So if someone is coming from the east and they're turning into the site, you can't control that by any signage. You can control it by the pork chop, by the way that Walgreens has done it. So you can't turn in to that location. You have to go around and come in at Cass. There's a reason for that. It prevents accidents. So I don't think that we can control it. Even if we did do that, IDOT may come back and tell you after we're done that we want that access modified.
They're telling me they're concerned that the driveway is not wide enough to support a pork chop either.
it's not wide enough for,
The access point's not wide enough to put it, for the right-in shopping.
well, it's something that the Walgreens one is done for truck traffic, and it's larger, that pork chop is larger than normal. And I just think you have to look at that, and maybe the pork chop is smaller than the one next door, and the radius is obviously smaller. So it's something that, it turns it into a drive. You know, yeah, you're right, it might be problematic, but I can't determine that here tonight. All I know is what you're saying is that the sign restricted outbound traffic is a good one, but it doesn't control the inbound, which means that traffic's still gonna be on Ogden Avenue. So, you know, I just want the best thing for Westmont, that's all.
So when you say the inbound, do you mean the left turn from the east and the right turn from the west? Is that able
Right
to
turn
be
from the west
controlled?
wouldn't be a problem, that would be free-flowing. The left turn coming in, when you have to wait on Ogden Avenue in the middle of the road in those turn lanes that are tapers for traffic to slow down for the stacking lanes, would be interrupted.
It looks like it would have to be restriped, and there is a project on Ogden, it is gonna be resurfaced, and we don't really know the details of that plan, but it may be that if we investigate, we'll see maybe a chicken lane or some kind of configuration like that. If you look at it straight ahead, you see that no cars can actually legally locate right on top of the striping. So, it's a more technical thing, and I think at this point, our staff recommendation would be to just simply go with the private side, you know, signalization and the arrow and so on, because this can become a bigger involved project.
Yeah, I think so too, Chris. I'm not convinced that this is as critical a issue as you seem to think that it is. And I think if people were going to park off-site, the neighbors, they're going to go in behind Las Palmas. They're not going to park on the north side of the street. I don't see the pedestrian issue as being any kind of an issue. That's my opinion.
No, I respect everyone else's opinion. My life revolves around life safety, so it's
Understood.
something that, you know,
And we appreciate
that's
your
my world, so it's
your
something that,
contributions.
you know, it's okay. I mean, I just entitled to opinion and vote, and everyone else is too, and I respect it.
Mr. Thomas, do you have an opinion?
No. My first question was about the traffic study.
Yes.
I had not thought about Wally's point about the three different types of businesses that have already been there. That brings it back down to not as important, in my opinion, as I initially thought was. So I'm in favor of no traffic study as of now. I had more problems with people parking in Jewel and just walking straight across, cutting across Ogden and not coming from just a jaywalking issue. And that's a police problem, you know, because the police department know you're coming. They know that they've had liaisons with you, and that has to be discussed.
Absolutely.
So I'm no longer in favor of the traffic study as a preliminary thing.
Okay, well, staying and talking with the access in and out of the parking, I think we've covered it well, but that parking lot itself needs some work. As a minimum, you know, it needs to be seal coated and painted, and there's a big divot right off the northwest corner of the building that your delivery vehicles are going to drop into when they're pulling ahead or backing along the west side of the building.
I wasn't aware of it, but
So that's,
we're not going to let that
I'm sure you'll have to deal with it. How many of those 30 employees have you hired already?
Well, none. I mean, it's too far
How
out.
many would you anticipate would be hired locally?
We generally hire within the community or the adjacent communities. People don't typically travel very far.
At what point would you want to get together with the police department, the Westmont Police Department, and,
You know,
I mean,
once the projects are go,
what
for
have
sure.
you done on your other businesses? At what point?
We usually, during the planning, have an initial conversation. They were at the original meeting we had and had an opportunity to ask questions. And then we don't normally engage until we kind of have a rough floor plan. And then we bring them out, show them around, talk through the security system we're having, address any concerns they have while we're still in the fixing, able to make changes stage. But they're typically, there's so much added security here relative to any other business that, they don't usually have comments.
Okay.
To be honest.
Wait. John, what do you think we need to hit this traffic impact study before we vote on anything else, or just?
That's really not up to me. I think Commissioner Lavoie feels strongly about it, so before you proceed to a motion on the underlying issue, Commissioner Lavoie, if he's so inclined, or anyone else, can make a motion to postpone this for the purposes of obtaining a traffic study, and this commission can vote that up or down. And then if it's voted down, you can move on to the merits. If it's approved, it'll be postponed and.
Okay. I think that's a fair way of dealing with this. Commissioner Lavoie, would you like to?
I don't think I want to make a motion to that.
Okay.
But before we get to that, though, let's make sure the public hearing's done and close the public hearing if that's the case.
Okay, I've covered all my questions. So, public hearing is now closed. I would point out that our vote does include the findings of fact. So,
I would like to bring one more item that has not been discussed. It was briefly touched on, and I want to make sure that we're all, considering this item, and it has to do with the architecture. We have design guidelines here in Westmont, and for the corridors, and it's on item number 4 on page 10, it talks about quality facing materials on all sides of the building, providing an attractive 360-degree appearance. So I just want to alert you to that design criteria. It isn't an ordinance or anything like that, but, having discussed that the materials for the facade will be different from the materials along the sides and the backs, just to kind of let that out and see if there's anything you want to discuss about that.
Well, they've already pointed that out, too.
And so, right, they have pointed it out. Mm-hmm.
and they're brick, the sides of the building and rear are brick, they're not unattractive.
Okay, that's all.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Certainly. And so the chair would entertain a motion to approve PZC 2005 request from Wendy's Scenic Cannabis for property located at 11 East Ogden regarding the following.
Before there's a motion, a question for John. There's several things that I would ask be included in the motion. Should I list those now or wait until there's a motion to list the specifics that would ideally be included in the motion?
Good point, and you're talking about special conditions that would be part of the special use ordinance. So why don't you finish what you were saying, ask for a motion subject to the following special conditions, and then Mr. Sylvester can read those.
Okay. A, special use permit to allow an adult use cannabis dispensary subject to the following special conditions. Chris.
Okay. So I hope the motion specifies hours of operation. Hopefully the motion will include any specific changes that are needed to the site plan, and that would include showing an ADA accessible stall. And it could include a requirement that the parking lot be repaved to address some of the issues that Chairman Carmichael brought up about the condition of the parking lot currently. Third, the motion could include a specific approval of the elevations as presented or not, if you want them different. Fourth, that the motion might include a specification that there be some form of traffic control during the first 30 or 60 days or whatever you are comfortable with. And fifth, that the off-site parking agreement would need to be recorded against the title as the village attorney explained earlier. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items that I've got notes that should be addressed, I think.
In the staff report, we have additional ones as well, and some of them have already been addressed, so they probably don't need to be stipulations because some of them are more like directives or considerations. But regarding the shared parking agreement, one of the items was to delay occupancy permit until that parking agreement was recorded and finalized. The other one would be, they have provided substantial improvements on their elevations, but maybe to fine tune them and provide more architectural, final architectural drawings that can be evaluated also against the design guideline related to the 360, to see how compatible the side looks with the front and so on, color renderings and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so at what point would you like to see that? So the more detailed elevations or the, would effectively be working drawings?
This is getting ahead, but the projected date for the village board meeting would be March 26th, I think, and I think that would give enough time if there's anything, if, you're able to produce it within the next 5 days.
Okay.
That kind
And
of thing.
send to you?
To me. Mhm.
Okay.
This-
Could I raise one other issue that was discussed?
I don't
You
know,
can-
that's,
I don't know, it might
Certainly.
be too late. Okay, no, I think we're willing to make improvements to the parking lot. I think that was a suggestion. I think we would probably want to limit it to minor patching and seal coating and restriping, as opposed to a repavement of the entire lot.
Yeah,
right. Also, another stipulation is just to reiterate that there won't be any sign variance request following approval. I touched on the design guidelines as well to avoid long blank facades visible from the public areas and so on, but we don't have that along the side. Because of the buildings to the side, it may not be a big issue. And then the driveway exit would need to show that arrow right only to encourage traffic, and also the sign that would have it as left turn prohibited. I think it's possible to do that on private property, but it's unenforceable by the police, but it's something you can do. And then the last one, I have more, but the last one would be the landscaping to make sure that that it's adhered to the landscape plan.
As part of every ordinance, the
Right.
landscaping and fencing, if there is fencing, has to be continuously maintained and replaced as necessary.
Right. And hours of operation, and what else was there?
so, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Could I just ask you one specific question, just so I get the site plan right? But the right-out arrow would be opposed by a straight arrow coming in, just so, because there's a designation of the two, the egress
That
and the
would make
ingress.
sense.
Yeah, so we'll just show a straight arrow coming in. and
One
then
going out.
out, you're kind of
And then
headed to the
a
right.
sign showing no left turn.
Right,
like-
and there would be nothing else written on the pavement, it would just be an arrow.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to add those. I have 6 items to the,
I know, but it's already recorded.
It's recorded.
so it's recorded. Excellent. So as listed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I think, recommend what you guys proposed seemed reasonable in light of the state regulations, which was 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. And if this commission would be acceptable, we can say that any change to hours of operation would have to go to the village board, rather than having a brand-new public hearing just on that issue. So if in 3 years from now, you wanted to change that condition,
That's the maximum hours. If we wanted to,
shorten them, yes.
and if we wanted to have like, a one-day dispensation from it also available or not?
We can talk about that, let me know, I mean, for ex-
Okay, any more come to the podium.
There's a cannabis holiday, April 20th, where we tend to run the whole day. So
I was just wondering for like.
Yeah, well, you know, let us know in advance, even for something like that. We can
Got it.
build it into the ordinance, and then we can build some flexibility.
Excellent.
As to those hours. I think
Perfect.
the concern is, at least my initial concern, not knowing the state limitations, was that this is open at 1 AM or something.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like the limit is,
6 a.m. to 10 p.m.,
10?
I believe, yes.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, as amended, special use permit to allow an adult use cannabis dispensary at 11 East Ogden.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second. Scales.
Second, Scales. Discussions on the motion? Yes.
Just to clarify, are we saying that as part, one of the stipulations that it will be between staff and village board to determine the extent of traffic control upon opening, or do we need to set a
No,
timeframe for 30 days of traffic supervision?
As needed, I would think.
I would say, yeah, not to be less than 30 days of traffic supervision during such hours as determined between the applicant and the Westmont Police Department.
Okay.
And I imagine it would probably be during peak rush hours.
We tend to run it all day for those beginning, and then it kind of tapers off and we slow it down.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it.
Okay. Further discussion? Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Scales.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
No.
Commissioner Clemens.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. In paragraph B, site development and landscape plan. Motion?
Motion.
Second, Sharp?
Questions on the issue? Discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Scales.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
No.
Commissioner Clemens.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
And Chairman Carmichael.
Carmichael?
Carmichael.
Yes. Okay, it passes, gentlemen. Staff will let you, go ahead, Bruce.
So it is a recommendation. It does need to go to the village board. They have the final decision. We're tentatively looking at the end of this month, but we, staff, will need from you revised material. So a revised site plan showing these arrows, maybe a detail of the signage, no left turn, maybe a revised narrative, addressing the hours as we've agreed to tonight, the traffic control that we've discussed tonight. So we'll need some information from you. Once we get everything from you that shows everything that's been discussed tonight, then and only then can we put this on the agenda for the village board, so.
This is what was presented. This was not
If-
presented.
And Nalini, jump in if.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we would be reviewing it internally and also making sure that the ordinance incorporates all of these things and so on. So I would think, given that, maybe into early April, that it would be scheduled, so,
Yeah, in fact, I think when we tentatively said we'd get this on the March village board agenda, we maybe jumped the gun. I think the first meeting in April is a more realistic date where we can be confident that this is ready to go up in front of the village board. So if you get us revised plans reflecting the discussions tonight, Nalini, correct me if I'm wrong, by Friday of next week, that will give us enough time to review it and the attorney enough time to draft the ordinance so that we can review it and get it into our internal system to get it on the agenda for the April 9th village board meeting. Does that sound reasonable, Nalini?
I think so.
Does that sound reasonable? So your deadline is to get us everything we need no later than Friday next week. Sooner, obviously, is appreciated. And we're now looking at a tentative April 9th date for the village board consideration of the recommendation made here tonight.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Miscellaneous items. Does anyone have any comments or updates for the board or for the public? Staff?
No.
In which case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Clemens?
Second, Thomas.
All in favor, say aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Really need to write the word